know this. Hattie McRae mattered. Her life mattered. And her memory still cries out for justice. She got a verdict, but she did not get honored. And she did not get justice. This is what happens when the law walks away, when it turns its back, when it leaves black people to lawlessness. But we are not turning our backs. We are not walking away. We are bearing witness. We are telling the truth. We are keeping the record. We are carrying her memory. Because memory is justice. And justice begins with testimony. So we remember Hattie McRae's name. We tell her story. And we're going to keep telling them. For Hattie and for all the others. And I'll be back in the next video as we move through this series with another name, another story, another reminder that when the law leads us, we must not leave each other. Now, I want to hear from you. Had you ever heard of Hattie McRae before? How did it make you feel learning what happened to her? Leave me a comment.
Fucking BC.
Let me make a thought.
Fucking BC. They trying to save the fucking network. I ain't mad at Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan.
That castle could be burned, bombed, or stolen. And the law will look.
But Michael Jordan shouldn't fuck with NBC.
No protection. You face injustice.
But I know they're gonna pay you well, Mike. Hey, do your thing.
No place was safe from humiliation, from pain, from violence, from brutality. Jim Crow didn't respect property owners. Deeds and titles meant nothing to him. He would find you wherever you were, especially if he felt that you were getting too close to him. This series is called No Escape because there was no point, preface, or crack that racist and injustice couldn't reach. He could have reached your school, your job, even your home. In the first video, I told you about Thomas Smith. 5,000 people went to war with each other just to make one black man for something he didn't do. In this video, I want to tell you about a black family who was terrorized just for wanting to live in peace. They weren't safe in their own home. In fact, it was their home that made them a target. Now, before I get into this story, let me frame this out for you. And to do that, I need to talk about the racism of something. If you know your black history, you know that this is a 1959 play written by Lorraine Hansberry. It was later adapted into a movie that stars some of the greatest black actors of all time. Sidney Poitier, Ruby Dee, and Lou Gossett Jr. Just to give you some background, the story follows a black family, the youngest, from Chicago's South Side. After the family patriarch dies, they receive a life insurance check. Walter Lee, played by Sidney Poitier, wants to use the money to open a business he believes will lift the family out of poverty. But his mother, Lena, played by Claudia McNeil, wants to use the money to buy a house in the suburbs. I love it because it tracks the this was a very mean purchase to make. It certainly was. This will cost $3,720,000 and the reality of racism. Now, I'm not going to break down the entire play here, but there's one part that's really awesome about that you guys can see. The family not in the white neighborhood. They're ready to get out of the camp and from the ghetto and into a place where they can grow and breathe. But before they do things, the white man told them, he also survived and house back. He represents the white neighborhood, and they do not want the younger to do this thing. At first, Walker is expecting myself, but eventually, he changes his mind. He tells the man to remember that family is going to be breaks as well. There's another person Luna says, I sure hope you know what you're getting into. The play ends with the family celebrating what's supposed to be a new beginning. But we never find out what happened to the younger. We never learn what the neighbors had planned for them. Not for the younger. But we know what they had planned for the thousands of the black families who dared to move into white neighborhoods. And that's what the story is about. What happened next? Oasis is trying to show us the dream. This story shows us the price that must be paid for black folks. I talked about how discrimination is going. And another video I did about Harvard and genetic faults. A black family moved from Harvard in Cisco, Illinois in 1951. And for that, white collar riot and the story of that. That story is one of my favorites on favorite shows. Top 5. So check it out if you haven't seen it already. In that video, I walk you through the barriers that black families face when they try to move into white neighborhoods. I want to return to that history because to understand what happened in this story, you have to understand the system that made it possible. You see, black parents fought hard to keep white people out of their neighborhoods. In 1910, Baltimore became the first city to adopt ordinance banning black people from moving into white neighborhoods. The Supreme Court struck that law down in 1917 in Buchanan versus Ward. But it didn't stop there. In 1926, the court ruled in Porter versus Buckley that private homeowners could still discriminate. That meant that white families could write racist covenants into their housing contract, legally barred black families from buying homes in certain neighborhoods. Then in 1948, the NAACP took on a case to the Supreme Court called Shelley versus Craig. It was about a black couple, J.D. and Ethel Shelley, who tried to buy a house in a white neighborhood in St. Louis. The neighbor said no, because the deed had falsely said that no black people had ever lived there. The Supreme Court ruled that judges could no longer enforce those kinds of racist covenants. But even that didn't stop the discrimination. It just moved the racism from the courtroom to the back room, and zoning boards, and banks, federal agencies. There is a post-World War II boom when white Americans benefited from government-backed loans to buy homes. Black people were completely shut out. Most banks refused to give black people mortgage loans because the Federal Housing Authority refused to insure mortgages in black neighborhoods. It drew massive areas where black people live as high risk. This practice came to be known as red line. The FHA discouraged banks from making any loans in black neighborhoods and preferred loans to be given for homes in newly built white suburbs. As the federal government helped to create the middle class by backing loans to white families in white areas through New Deal and GI Bill programs, black people were left in camps like overrun and squalor neighborhoods. This is how the black ghettos are created. And when black people tried to move out of the ghettos, they were met with violence. Now that brings us to the way that what happened to them in 1952. Andrew Wade IV was born Andrew Wade Jr. in Leatherwood, Nashville, Tennessee in 1922. He was one of two children. We don't know exactly when, but the family eventually made their way to Louisville, Kentucky. Andrew's father worked as a motion picture operator and as an electrician, and his mother did the domestic work. After graduating from high school, Andrew went to Boston College to become an electrician. But there were no schools in Kentucky that would accept black students into electrical training programs. So he left his home state and enrolled at Hampton University in Virginia to study. 3 years later, the country began World War II. Andrew was drafted, and like so many other black men, he served his country. He fought to protect freedom and democracy abroad, even though he and his family never had it at home. After the war, he returned to Louisville. By 1950, his father...
Hello, sir. How can I be of help today?
Andrew joined him in the business. Despite Jim Crow being all around him, the Wade family lived a full life. Andrew even helped to promote the family business by appearing in newspaper ads. He was also an avid tennis player. He was good enough to win tournaments. Sometime later, Andrew met and married a woman named Charlotte. The young couple was excited and ready to live a life together. There was just one problem. One thing they were missing. Playing golf. And it was that design that we had with creativity, building the chaos, violence, and destruction. Andrew saved his money for 7 years after his return to the Navy. But one day,
Hey, how can I help?
home for his future family.
Sure thing.
He and
Limo
Charlotte
en route.
lived with a black neighborhood. But they couldn't find anything that suited their needs. So they extended their search into white neighborhoods. Andrew knew they were bringing on but she would later say that he had served his country in war, and himself, he had the right to live with his own. The way he was kind of big enough for their growing family. They liked to make out Louisville suburb, but they ran into roadblocks at every single turn. Several houses refused to sell to them once they learned they were black. One builder, son of Andrew service in war, refused to build for them. Then they came from the bottom of the home in Sydney. It was perfect. It was the right book and the right price. But there was one problem. It wasn't the money, because they had that. It was their race. They were black. And there was no way they were going to get this shit. So instead of getting denied again, they came up with a plan. The way for a real respected black family, and they were really, really involved. So Andrew and his father were contributors to Louisville Black newspaper, the Defenders. They were active in the NAACP, spoke out against the injustice and exploited one black people. In 1953, Andrew Rubin had worked with the defendant. He criticized the Department of Defense that condemned the Constitutional law while allowing black citizens to suffer the same brutality that home. He warned that black veterans, just like himself, men who served their country in war, were having them involved just as trying to do the white neighborhood. Little did he know that that would become his story. Because Andrew
All right, we might be ready to move on this thing. If you want the work, you'll get a knock on your door any minute.
one such couple, Pearl and Brady, he took the NAACP and from his volunteer work, Henry Wallace's 1948 presidential campaign. Andrew and Charlotte asked Brady if they would buy the house, and then transfer the property to them. They weren't doing anything illegal. They were trying to get around the blockade that was put in place to keep black families out of white neighborhoods. Whites wouldn't sell to black lives, but they would sell to other white people, and that would be the way to way in. The greatest quickly agreed to help. Andrew and Charlotte were elated. They could finally begin their lives in a good area, with good schools. They already had a young daughter, Rosemary, and Charlotte was pregnant with their second child. The greatest of them was on May 7, 1954, and the property was transferred to Kuwait a few days later. With joy and excitement, Andrew and Charlotte moved to the new home on May 14th to the wrong school. Now, notice I said they had joy and excitement when they got the keys to the new home. Their joy was the journey of raising a family of peace and tranquility. That was exciting. The fact that they were about to live and love together, about to raise their children, build wealth for their home. They were going to live like other Americans. But Andrew and Charlotte weren't just any Americans. They were black Americans. And what was accessible for non-black Americans was not accessible for them. The right to live free, not for them. The right to go and sleep, not for them. The right to live where you want, not for them. The American dream, a house, a picket fence, 2 kids and a dog, that was not for them. Not because they had done anything wrong, but because they were black. The dream that so many others got to live was about to become a nightmare for Andrew and Charlotte. On the first day that they moved in, the building, Dick and Rome, he stopped by to check in with Carl Drake and see if he needed something. And remember, still believed he felt the right something. But when he arrived, he saw Andrew and her. And so Andrew went to the bridge. But when Andrew told him that he lived in the house, that was it. He had just his strength started rolling and full steam. As soon as he left, he spread the word. Black people were in the neighborhood. And it didn't take long for Jim Crow Court to implement their black people plan. The plan told justice and violence. Remember at the beginning, I talked about race and how we found out what came next. We know what said that something never knew what they were getting themselves into. Well, what happened next to the way was what he was referring to. The way were about to live the system for race and son. The very next day, after they moved in, Andrew and Charlotte went to town. When they came back, someone had thrown a brick through their front window. Wrapped around the brick was a message: get out by tonight. But it didn't stop there. That same night, around 10:30 p.m., a call was burned near their home. Andrew saw the man by the fire and his weapon fire at them, but he stopped. He knew it would only bring more trouble. But still, it was not over. That same night again, around 2 a.m., someone fired 8 shots through the kitchen window, almost hitting them. The Jefferson County Police provided a way to protection. When asked by reporters if he would move, if he would leave, Andrew said boldly that he and his family intended to live or die there. Little did he know that those who wanted him gone would see just how committed he was to their safety, especially the dying. Can you imagine this? I've said this before, and it's worth saying again here. This happens to the and it happened to them in real time. It's important for you not just to hear me tell you the story, but to truly picture Andrew, Charlotte, and their daughter Rosemary. Picture them in that home, boxes still scattered around. See the family move to the Bible to their new home. Being excited.
Well, this is it, your humble car wash. Dirty money comes in, clean money comes out. Now, obviously, we should wash the occasional car, you know? We need a little clean money to balance the books, but more importantly, we need a lot of dirty money.
Put it up across.
Just boot up this laptop to see what jobs we got waiting. Also, if you want to be in Mr. Faber's good graces, you want to solve problems in the network before he even knows about them. Work with his big clients, keep things running
Should
smooth.
we stay?
But listen, I know you're very busy, very important, so if it's something small, you can just call me, all right? That's safe side catching, huh? You want some liquidity? It's right here for you.
Shots were through their kitchen window. This is not just a story.
What's happening?
The Wades lived through every second of their night. They breathed through every terrifying moment. This is what is meant by new escape. Where were they supposed to go? They were supposed to be safe in their home. But it was their home that made them a target. Where they chose to live is what invited this terror. This is what it meant to be black. No hiding place from injustice. And I want us to be careful not to fall into second guessing. Sitting here over 70 years later, imagining what we would have done, how we would have handled it. We have to be careful with that, because when we do that, we're applying our standards of living and decision making to a time when Jim Crow made life or death decisions for black people, and did it with the full force of law. The truth is, none of us know what we would have done in this situation.
I'm on the clock. What you want? Some wheels?
Charlotte lived through something none of us would ever want to face. And we owe it to them.
I'll bring it to you.
Not to second guess their actions. It's not fair to them. And to the thousands of the black families who lived through this. After violence didn't work, the builder stepped in and tried to get the Wades out. He offered to buy the house back.
Hi, what do you need?
But still, it
Sure,
said-
no problem.
because it wasn't about the money for the Wades. It was about the principle. About the right to live where they choose. And that should have ended it, but it didn't. Because Jim Crow had all kinds of people working for him. He wasn't just the leader of the mobs. He ran the courts, the police, and even the banks and the financial institutions. He was everywhere. Andrew and Charlotte legally purchased the home. They had a mortgage on it. They had every intention to pay that mortgage, and they hadn't missed a single payment. They hadn't defaulted on any of their obligations. The trouble that came was not their doing. But remember, as I just said, Jim Crow had people working for him in every sector. South End Federal Savings and Loan held the $8,000 mortgage on the Wades home. And on June 18th, the bank sued the Wades for foreclosure. They were throwing everything they had at this black family. And this goes back to the point I've been highlighting in so many of my videos. When you were black, you were outside the law. It didn't protect you. It was there to be weaponized against you. And this is a perfect example of that. Foreclosure is supposed to be for people who default. The Wades had not done that. But the bank still marched into court and used the law as a tool of Jim Crow. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. Once again, they had no escape. The Wades knew they had to act fast. Attorney Eubank Tucker stepped in and took their foreclosure case, representing the family in court and trying to stop the bank from seizing their home. And it wasn't just Attorney Tucker. Black people across Louisville stepped up too. A group of local leaders formed the Wade Defense Committee to help the family fight back. Reverend M.M.D. Perdue, pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church, he served as the chairman. He didn't see this as just about the Wades. He said they were fighting for something larger. Not just saving one family's home, but investing in a future where black people could live in a decent world. The committee called on the public to donate to the Wades, to help them with this cause, to help them fight back, to help them keep their home. Meanwhile, Andrew and Charlotte were doing everything in their power to stop the bank from taking their home. They needed $8,000 to pay off the mortgage in full. So they went to a black-owned bank and applied for a loan. And they were told they would get it. But the pressure surrounding them was intense. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about the neighborhood, about power. And when the opposition found out the Wades were about to secure the money, that they were about to beat the foreclosure and stay in their home, they escalated. On the night of June 26th, the Wades' home was bombed with dynamite. The house was destroyed, making sure they would never get the loan they needed to save it. Under the law, banks couldn't lend money from a property that wasn't livable. And that law, like so many others, was turned against the Wades. The bombing all but guaranteed the foreclosure. By the time any repairs could be made, the bank would have already taken the home back. Everything they worked for was gone. 7 years of savings, gone. The dream of building a life, a family, and a future, gone. All because they were black and wanted to live in a decent home. Now remember, the Wades had police protection, or at least they were supposed to. Officers were assigned to guard the home the night it was bombed. And yet somehow, the patrolman on duty didn't see a thing. He never saw the perpetrators walk up to the house, crawl underneath it, place the explosive, and then walk away. Now one thing, the Kentucky Bureau of Negro Affairs wasn't buying that excuse. Its president, Attorney Eubank Tucker, who also represented the Wades, called on the FBI to investigate the police department for its complicity in the bombing. But nothing happened. No investigation. No accountability. No one cared what happened to the Wades. When she was interviewed, Charlotte Wade said this about the bomb. Once my husband and I always possessed this fear created by oppression. Once we lived friendless and skeptical in a white neighborhood. She went on to ask, must I, my children, and my grandchildren live and die in racism? I want you to sit with that, because that wasn't just a statement. That was a cry. A black woman, a mother, a black, standing in the rumble of what was supposed to be her dream, asking if fear was going to be her family's inheritance, wondering why violence was their reward for hard work. She was asking the same question that every black person asked in those days, and still asks today. Why? Why am I here? What have I done? Why can't my family thrive? Why must we suffer? Why are we relegated to the bottom rail of society? Why must we die in such brutal, horrific ways? Why do you hate us? What did we ever do to deserve this? These are the questions of the people who have known nothing but injustice. And that's what Charlotte was asking after Jim Crow came in her home and refused to leave. The Wade Defense League continued to fight for the family. They declared July 18th Andrew Wade Day, a day to raise money so that the Wades could buy the mortgage and stop the foreclosure and rebuild what had been taken from them. I love to tell stories like this because it gives us a chance to expand our understanding of what black resistance really looked like, move beyond the narrow and selective stories of protest that were usually told. The truth is, we fought back, we organized, we protested, we supported each other, year after year, in every era, in every way since emancipation. Because every year after freedom, there was a new plan to drag us back into chains, back into bondage. And stories like this are just one of countless moments when black people came together to say no to Jim Crow. But Jim Crow just would not stop. Because when we stood up, he knocked us back down. No one was ever arrested for the bombing of the Wade's house. But someone was arrested at the Wade's house for something else entirely. That person was Andrew Wade. The police were supposed to be protecting the Wades, but all they did was add to the harassment. In early August, the Wades were visited by their friend, Wallace Perkins. Police didn't want him in the home. Not because he was a threat, but because they didn't want any more black people there. They claimed Wallace's name wasn't on the approved list of visitors allowed to see the Wades.
Damn.
When Andrew objected, both he and Wallace were arrested and taken to jail. They weren't released until each posted a $100 bond. The police saw nothing when the bomb showed up with fire and dynamite. Nothing when the black family's home was blown off its foundation. But let one black man show up to visit his friends, and suddenly they sprang into action. Andrew was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 30 days in jail. And he was fined $100 for breach of the peace at his own home. Let that settle. He did nothing wrong. He bought the home, secured the mortgage. He didn't burn a cross on anyone's lawn. He didn't fire shots into anyone's house. He didn't plant dynamite and put a community at risk. He did none of that. He served his country, risked his life for it, and his reward was violence. His reward was silence from the law. His reward was jail time and fine. All because he dared to buy a home. All because he dared to speak up about who had the right to walk through the door of his own home. But this story is not over just yet, because it takes an unexpected turn from here. Andrew got his punishment, but there were still others involved in this incident who Jim Crow needed to send a message to. Commonwealth Attorney A. Scott Helms was under pressure. The black community was demanding accountability. They wanted the bombers prosecuted. They wanted justice. And Hamilton did something our way, just not what anyone expected. He convened a grand jury to investigate the entire incident. But when the investigation ended, it wasn't the bombers who were indicted. it was Carl and Ann Brady, along with 7 of Andrew Wade's white supporters. Not for violence, not for fraud, not for trespassing, but for sedition. The state of Kentucky charged them with attempting to overthrow the government simply because they bought a house and sold it to a black family. That's it. It was the first time the state had ever used its 1920 sedition law. I want you to really think about that. The people who bombed the Wade's home were never prosecuted, but the people who helped them buy it were treated like enemies of the state. This is how Jim Crow operated. It wasn't just about punishing black people. It was about punishing anyone who dared to stand with us. They cast the Bradys as communists, framing their act supported some subversive plot to destroy America. Because in Jim Crow's eyes, helping a black family move into a white neighborhood, that was treason. The sedition charges weren't just about intimidation. They were strategic. This was the 1950s, the peak of McCarthyism. Anti-communist hysteria was everywhere, and Jim Crow used that hysteria as a weapon. Instead of admitting that racism was the root of the violence, the state flipped the script. Claimed the Bradys weren't fighting for civil rights. They were part of a communist conspiracy to sow unrest in America. And that gave them the cover. Instead of prosecuting the men who planted the bomb, they put a white couple on trial for subversion. The state even argued that the Wades were just pawns in the Bradys' larger plot, as if a black family seeking a home was part of some master plan to take down democracy. This is how Jim Crow protected himself, by punishing those who help black people, by turning support into a crime, and by using patriotism as a cover for injustice. Carl Brady was tried and convicted of sedition. For helping the Wades buy a home, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison and fined $40,000. But in 1956, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the state sedition laws in a case called Pennsylvania versus Nelson, and Carl was released. While the Brady sedition trial grabbed national headlines, the Wades were still fighting largely alone. The foreclosure suit dragged out into 1957, and the insurance money for the bombing was frozen while the courts debated who should receive it: the builder, mortgage company, or the Wades. When the court finally ordered the money to be applied to the mortgage,
You know what? We're growing. We're learning.
The home. The bank then demanded full payment. The couple from Chicago stepped in to help, but the violence and the threats never stopped. Then 6 months later, fearful
How have you been? Listen.
Andrew Wade sold the home and moved his family to Louisville's West End. He continued his activism briefly in the 1960s, but soon after that, he withdrew into private life. Andrew Wade died in 2005 at the age of 83. The Wades rarely spoke about what happened in 1954. And, to be honest, who could blame them? What they endured was too much. It broke something in them. They had enough of Jim Crow. Not because they were weak, but because he was relentless. We have never been a match for Jim Crow. Not in strength, not in force. His weapons were more powerful. His tactics more brutal. It has never been a fair fight. And the Wades decided that they no longer wanted to wrestle with Jim Crow. He could keep the house, he could keep the neighborhood, and he could keep the line. That's why this series is called No Escape. Because for families like the Wades, the walls that home couldn't shield. The law couldn't shield.
Hey, how can I help? Coming up.
Escape. Not from violence, not from the punishment, and not from the lie. That's what the weight of injustice does to black people. It doesn't just chase us, it wears us down. It drains the hope, it steals the fight. Because when you realize there is no way out, no courtroom, no police, no bank, no law that will stand up for you, escape becomes a dream. And the pressure becomes unbearable. That's what happened to the Wades. They didn't give up. They just couldn't escape injustice. And that's why we have to tell these stories. Jim Crow had his say in 1954. But today, we are having ours. Jim Crow kept alive, but we carry the truth. We tell the story. We tell it for Andrew, for Charlotte, and for Rosemary, and for the Bradys even. The Wades didn't get justice in 1954, but by remembering them and what happened to them, we give them justice today. Because memory is a form of justice. So we remember them. We let the world know what they went through, what they could not escape. And in the next video of this series, I'm going to give you another name. Another story that proves there was no place safe for us. You've heard from me. Now, had you ever heard the waves before, and what did you think about what they endured? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts.